Hello, everyone. Welcome to the roundup here on BloodbowlLive. Here to go through all of the week's action from the ADBBL Season 8. We've got 12 games to go through this week. We've got our 8 Hopsters Bonanza games and then 4 additional fixtures at the end. Joining me this week, as always, Mr. Scott Bryant. Scott, good afternoon, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Christopher Cole. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Oh, we discussed this last week. It's evening because it's dark, isn't it? That's right.
It is.
I remember now. And also joining us, Mr. Tom Hovell. Tom, good evening, sir.
Good evening. You're right.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Very good. We're not going to dawdle around because we've got lots of games to get through. So we are going to dive straight in. And we start in Hopsters last Wednesday. Firstly, a huge thank you to everyone who came and played a game. It was a really, really good atmosphere in there. It was great to kind of have the place filled out and have so many people playing at the same time. And I know Hopsters were very grateful for the amount that we drank that evening as well. So a very big thank you to everyone for being there and behaving themselves and being in the spirit of the evening. The first game that we had for Hopsters then is the Hillbilly Howlers versus the Numpties, a 2-1 victory for the Nurgle side, which is the Nurgle's final game of the group stage. They are 8 games from 8. They're sitting at the top of the table and now just have to look over their shoulder for the remainder of the group stage. A good game for the Nurgle team, but it wasn't. It was actually in a way a kind of a trademark Elliot performance, I think, to a degree. I've never seen Elliot look phased going a touchdown down ever, and in this game that's exactly what happened. Simon takes the lead with the Chaos Chosen, but Elliot fights his way back, not through casualties, just through perseverance, and gets there and gets the game up to 2-1. Scott, we'll come to you first on this one then. Simon looked quite confident sort of when he was a touchdown up, but it's tricky with Elliot, isn't it, because you can never he never looks phased. You never see him looking too riled, too concerned about going down. He seems to always know that the 2-1 grind is there and that he can get it.
I agree. The 2-1 grind seems to be a staple of the Huns, and the Smith stable, shall we say? So, if you had to predict most of Elliot's games, you said, what do you think the score will be? 2-1, I think, would be most people's expectation as well. So I think Simon's starting to learn it, get his feet with Chaos Chosen. Having now 2 rerolls really, really helps. Scoring his first touchdown on turn 6. So when I saw this on tour play in the feed, it was Elliot didn't score his first touchdown and level it up until turn 12, which at that point you think, is it going to be all over? So to score what is a relatively very quick touchdown with the Pestigor for Nurgle on turn 14 was a bit of a turnaround. So maybe the process and maybe the way of getting the 2-1 result wasn't the classic receive and then score 1 on turn 8, but more it was like score 2 quick touchdowns. It just shows that Elliot can win in a lot of different guises, and it suggests as well that Simon was putting a lot more pressure on those Pestigors and Nurgle.
He's been quite patient, Simon, with the skills that he has put on there. He's got blocks, sure hands, chosen skills on the Beastmen. The Beastmen very kind of versatile players because they've got access to mutations and to general and to strength skills. He's got the Minotaur in there. Tom, Elliot there must have been a little bit of fear facing 2 Minotaurs from the start because Grashnak came into play in this one. But Nurgle are relatively, as long as you don't get the sort of wrong end of the plague-ridden casualty roll, relatively resilient team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they've got the bloaters on armor 10, so they're pretty chunky guys. Equally with a rot spawn in there as well. Yeah, and just picking up on that second touchdown, I wonder if it was a quick touchdown because sometimes the kick or goes in favour of the person receiving, or even the person who is actually going to be kicking the ball. So by the looks of things, he's obviously scored the touchdown and then he's kicked the ball to Simon, but clearly taken it off him. So I know in my game there was a number of great kickoff events that made our game go quite quickly. So I wonder whether that's the situation here, especially with, as you say, Nurgle, not known for their speed and agility.
No, there's some good skills that Elliot has got on some of these Nurgle players now as well. Block and claws on a bloater is going to be a very sort of good piece to have in the mix. And block on a Pestigor, block and claws on alignment, which may only be strength 2, but there's still two good skills to have there. So he's clearly building a strong kind of team here going forward. Elliot's game is done now, and before we move on to the next one, just a quick question for both of you. He's played all of his games. He sits at the top of the table. We've had this discussion before, whether it's better to play your games and look over your shoulder and stay on form, or to pace them out sort of with your opponents. And you've got more opponents this time. You've got a bigger table to watch. Is Elliot going to be nervous looking at some of the teams below him and what some of those teams can do?
Absolutely, yeah. I would agree with that. I don't know about you yourselves, that I don't normally like to do all my games and then watch, because that doesn't really matter for me, because you know they don't think there's many people that are below me normally on the league, but it's also, I suppose, it's all down to people's availability and everything.
Scott?
Personally, as we've discussed before, my preference is to spread the games out. And I love a good old sporting cliche, and this is a sporting cliche. You can only beat the team in front of you when you play them. And Elliot's, recovered from again. We need to remember this is a brand new team for Elliot in terms of competitive league. Started off with the loss. He had 2 draws, and there he is at the moment. He's done and dusted. It's now for other people to catch him. So I don't think he's in a bad position. Will 17 points be enough? I expect it to be yes.
I think 17 will be enough, but like I said, we've got a whole other 6 weeks to go where he's going to be looking over his shoulder. So we'll see whether it is. Moving on to the next game, then we've got the Boulders Bowlers versus the Chaos Storm here. A 2-1 victory for the Chaos Dwarf team. It's another game that was going quite well for the Corn side, taking the lead in this one. But the brutality of those Chaos Dwarfs came into play quite quickly, and 4 casualties there, 18 SPP, 2 touchdowns. Touchdowns coming here sort of, halfway through. A very similar picture, really, to the game that we've just looked at here. We know how good Tom is. Tom, we know kind of what he's got sort of behind him here. I would say that if you're looking at this, that this is a good result for Owen. While it's not a win, he's taken the lead against someone like Tom. He's kept it to a 2-1 game, got some SPP for the team. Not the worst result against the current champion.
Yeah, I agree. It was a bit of it. I kept having a look at this game as I was wandering around at Hopsters and having a look, and it was a bit of a bloody match, quite literally. Straight away, an injury and an armor injury, no less, on a Chaos Dwarf Flamesmith, which is an interesting one. So they can be beaten. They can, armor and injuries can be done on them, but then straight away, coming in and the first of 2 dead, unfortunately for the Corn team, which is a bit of a situation where you go, losing players left, right, and centre here. So it was a real eye opener, and I know as you quite rightly say, Tom's probably the reigning champion against a relatively new player in the league. So, but a great atmosphere on this one. Like I say, I believe they know each other anyway, but there was some really good fun and laughter on this kind of game.
It's
Sorry, Chris.
no, you go.
I was fortunate enough, and I think I think for me, I know as Tom alluded to, Owen's played other Tom a number of times, and he's done a lot of sessions with him in terms of practice matches. So before the match, he was very smiling and very cheerful about it as well. And at half time, he came past and mentioned to me that he was 1-0 up, but he was expecting, shall we say, a very, very tough second half in terms of the match as well. So yeah, good old Tom. He knows this team and he knows Blood Bowl very, very well, and had to play a good game as well. And I think Owen should walk away and enjoying himself. He had a really good ethos. He seemed to enjoy himself on Wednesday night in Hopsters. And again, I think it's going to be a really good learning curve. So to hold the current champion to 2-1, to actually, inflict casualty and to be holding him at half time, I think it's got a lot positive for Owen to build on, especially in his rookie season.
Definitely lots to look at there. The Corn team is now looking, there's some sporadic SPP across the board there, but some good players that he's starting to build maybe for next season. Looking at the way the Chaos Dwarfs currently look, block guard, sure hands block, 13 SPP on a Hobgoblin lineman sat there, with all the touchdowns, with them, 6 SPP sat on a Chaos Dwarf blocker. It's a growing team that's only going to get better on this one for sure. I think probably when you look at the form of both coaches, you probably say this was a result to be expected, but maybe closer than we thought, which is a nice result to see. We'll dive straight on. We'll fly straight through to our next game, which is the Buffalo Biggins versus the Wildermere Wasps, a absolute orc bash fest here. Orcs versus Black Orcs in a game that was looked very tight on the field. A couple of secret weapons coming in for the Black Orc team. Looks like Bomber and Fungus came to play in this particular instance. And relatively even across the board here with regards to casualties as well. And a very tight result coming for the Buffalo Biggins, managing to get a touchdown near the very end of the game. Scott, we'll come to you first on this one. Harrison has results-wise this season. He's been a sort of slow start. There was an early win, a loss to Luke there, and there's a game to come which is a bit better. Good to use a game like this to kind of jumpstart him and just sort of get where he needs to go.
A great match for Harrison, and shout out to Simon in terms of his enjoyment and enthusiasm and the way he plays Blood Bowl as well. So big shout out there, Simon. Keep it up. For Harrison, in terms of the Bash Fest between the Orcs and the Black Orcs, for me, this feels very much a reflection of a bit more experience with Harrison in terms of how he's played. This is season 3, I believe, with the Biggins. So in terms of how he's been playing this, he started slow last year. Really gained momentum. And, we'll come on to talk about the second match shortly, but this really, I felt, gave him that little bit of momentum as he's gone forward now. So he's now got, the key players very, very skilled up. So he's got his blitzer, AJ Epinaza. He's also got Dion Dawkins, who's looking very good as well. And then to have that other mixture sprinkled through the team, in terms of, he's got block on a lineman, he's random dauntless, and a few others, which aren't too bad. Don't get me wrong, armbar and pile driver on a big unblocker maybe are not the skills you select. But at the end of the day, you've got block and mighty blows, so are you really worried about that? So a really good game again for Harrison. Again, another solid performance for Simon. Just feel Simon's he's in that position as a coach when you're developing, playing a lot of solid Blood Bowl. It's maybe the luck of the dice, maybe, the way things transpire just to get you over the edge into that draw, into that win.
I think, Tom, this is what I was going to ask you, actually, because I was thinking about this earlier today. I was having a think about my own season, but also outside of the league, what competitive results I'd had with my Lizards over a kind of over a few tournament sessions. And I realized that actually I'd got maybe 2 wins out of about 10 games in tournaments. And I thought back to some of those games, and I played against a lot of very, very good coaches, coming away with tight results that I lost, but definitely coming away better. Looking at Simon's games and who he's played, Andy, Harrison, Luke, myself, Carl, and then looking at last season, his last game was against John. He may not have got a win under his belt yet, but playing against some experienced coaches who are also getting better and better, he will be getting better and better as a coach. So it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's got 1 win this season.
Against Carl.
Yeah, but yeah, you absolutely. He's been playing like all very experienced coaches. You know, some ex winners of the seasons as well, previous seasons. So he's been building up quite a good kind of knowledge of how to play these Black Orcs. The Black Orcs are always a bit of a funny one when you compare them against relative just standard Orcs. You know, they're a lot slower. They've all got brawler and grab, and there's a whole load of linemen. But as we've said in the past, sometimes these kind of very straightforward setups where you've literally only got 3 players, 3 different positionals, Black Orcs, Troll, and Goblins, do sometimes really work well, where you can just focus, you know what they're doing. Plus, also look at the skills that those Black Orcs have got now. They've got mighty blows on a couple of them. They've got some blocks, tackle, pro, thick skulls, guard, and then you've got all those goblins with things like sneaky git, sidestep. So you can see that they've been built to do a particular task. You know, that sneaky git one's purely there, you know, for fouling, but then there's the other one that's got sidestep, defensive. Let's say no more. A safe pair of hands really is that kind of goal scorer kind of piece there. So yeah, these are looking quite good, decent Black Orc teams. And then if you, as Scott's quite rightly mentioned, you know, those Orcs, Buffalo Biggins, they've got a lot of good skills on them as well, but they've also got 4 with niggling injury. So is that going to come back to haunt Harrison later in the season?
Yeah, it could do, keeping hold of some of these players who are starting to get some kind of repeat injuries there. I think a very close game here. I think both coaches will have come away with a lot learned in this one. Well done to Harrison, and well done to them both for playing out a strong game. Moving on then nice and quickly to our next one, which Scott, we're on you, good sir. The Argarthan Mewers versus the Atomic Cherry Bombs, a 3-1 victory for the Wood Elves, in a game that started, I believe, with the Norse team looking on top and then seemed to very quickly turn the other way. Scott, why don't you tell us how this one went down?
So first of all, apologies to Jack if he listens to this. This was as much as this was one game of 2 halves. When we talk about the second game for the Cherry Bombs this week, the other game was another game of 2 halves, but quite the reverse of this. So in this particular match, Jack decided to receive the ball first. So he did that, took the kick, formed up a really, really big solid cage. And, you know, particularly with the strength that he's got in there and the inherent block, couldn't get that. And deservedly, Jack went down the pitch and scored on turn 6, which for most teams is like a bit of a worry. But for Elves, it wasn't too bad. And, you know, managed to get that back. So for turn 8, got the 2-turn touchdown. To be honest with you, I was looking at it in terms of getting there and doing it. So as well as that, managed to get one of the beer balls off the pitch in terms of injuries and score to level it up. Start of the second half, yeah, you can see it in the 2-play. Yes, I did milk a bit of SP, particularly with my thrower. So, you know, thrower to catcher, catcher to thrower, thrower to catcher to me to you. So it was a bit of the Pink Chuckle Brothers in there as well. However, as you can see, second half, Jack actually kills 2 of my elves. Now, when you kill 2 of the opposition players in a half, usually that's a pretty good sign that you're going to have a good win there. But I take my hat off again to Jack, kudos. The elves did complete over the top elvish bullshittery, which even I was a bit embarrassed with at some time. For me, there were 3 key turning points in the match from the elves. First of all, when Jack killed the first catcher, Scott the Pink Phipps, he killed him, but then the ball was already on the floor, which gave him an opportunity to do the blitz, kill the catcher as well. And then the ball was getting ready to scatter. He blitzed onto the ball, the elf, went to scatter, and it went to my thrower, who was between an Ulfwerner and the Yeti, I believe. So what do elves do? Yeah, they rolled a 6, got the ball, dodged out, went around, gave it to a War Dancer. War Dancer went through the gap, made a little, semi-cage, and then managed. Jack couldn't quite get there to force a blitz or failed double rush, also failed a dodge, and it was then 2-1. The second part of that then at 2-1 is the Wood Elves I did a cage leap with the War Dance with strip ball, did the 3-up, and then actually Tom Huns was watching there. Tom and Owen had finished. They were watching the match. And then as I thought it was going to be a 1 dice block, and then Tom reminded me, which is perfectly fine, that the 2 Ulfwerners at the front of the cage had guard. So all of a sudden I go from a 3-up leap to a 2 dice uphill, and that elves being elves, it was a power and a stumble. So of course, get the ball dodges and managed to turn that over, and then it led to a big scrum of players, and it was the third part of it. This is number 3. There was a block on a War Dancer, which everybody was super happy about, didn't break armor. Then the War Dancer happened to be next to the ball carrier, who was a Valkyrie. The War Dancer jumped up, did a 1 dice block, which happened to be block on the 1 Valkyrie who didn't have block. So the ball went to the next square, which is free, and the War Dancer did a 5-up dodge, 5-up pickup, 4-up dodge, 2-up dodge, gone. And it was that sort of, even I was like a bit, I wouldn't say I was a bit embarrassed to roll it, because you just like 5-up, yeah, 5-up, yeah, 4-up, yeah, 2-up, yeah, sorry, I'm gone. And it was just hard. You can see it is just soul destroying at times when you've done so well in a match. You've killed 2 elves, and still they can just get the ball and go out. So it was. I felt it was a bit of a, the dice were very much, Nuffle's blessings were very much on my side that day. And I don't think the 3-1 was a fair reflection of the match, if I'm honest.
Tom, Jack's season has been a tough one. He's had some tough opponents in his kind of list of teams that he's had to play. He's had some seasoned ADBBL players, some players who have, like him, kind of gone from strength to strength. And he's been unlucky, I think, maybe to play some key people at some key times. But looking at his team, sort of if he can keep some of these players through the playoff through the playoff stage, now all his games are done, he's got a couple of real stars there that could see him on a really good run if he brings them again next season.
Absolutely, yeah. Both his Valkyries are a real nuisance when you play against them. And as you quite rightly say, he's done the right thing. Especially one of those Valkyries is now got a movement 8 with dodge and block. So that is a real threat. So as you say, good luck. And did you just mention he's played all his games now, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. He's now played all of his fixtures. 7 points from his games. We'll have a look at the table later. So he'll probably be looking to see sort of who's going to move around him at this point.
Yeah. All I have to say is I think Scott might be getting a call from RSPCA with, bullying a poor beer ball with a War Dancer, no less. That's a bit over TT.
Well, Scott, we'll come back and talk to you more about your games this week, because we've got another game to go over a bit later. Just before we do, this game left you 5 wins from 5.
It did, yeah, 5 out of 5 to start with.
How much of you were thinking at some point the run had to end, and how much of you were thinking you're going to continue this through this season?
I was expecting, to be honest with you, I was expecting my run to end on match 1 when I was up against Simon, and especially as he blitzed off my War Dancer in the first turn. That was the first action of this season. So at that point, I thought, okay, where are we going from here? And even when I played Mr. Hovel in the second game, so it's the thing with elves. You've got to just take, and I love the cliche sporting meme. You can only take one game at a time. Don't think ahead of that, and really build it up. And there's been times when in all matches, all the other coach have had chances. But it seems that the elves and their agility, when they're skilled, it really, really does come to the fore as well. So it's been fun. There's been a real mix of experience and knowledge, but some great results. Some results could have gone the other way very, very easily, and so that's Blood Bowl. So for me, it's take the wins while you can. That's what this league season has been all about. Just take the win, get the result, move on. Because you're only one game away from a good kicking, shall we say?
Maybe
Spoiler alert.
For next week we'll make a sporting cliche bingo card for Scott, because
I think that'd be great.
getting through all of them this week. Moving on to the next game, it's myself versus Nick, a 2-1 victory for the Bitey Ducks against the Inglorious Pustards. In a game that was that I really enjoyed playing against Nick. It was really good fun. And it was a game, I think I mentioned this to James at some point as I was playing, where it was quite nice that I was looking at situations, and I was actually remembering being in identical situations to the one that I was in that moment, and having made a mistake and it costing me badly, and then not doing it. So there was something odd about this game where I seem to be going through these things. I've played Nick twice before, back in season 4, with my redrafted Ducks versus his Black Hawks at the time, and the difference in coach that Nick is now compared to then is massive. This was not a comfortable game. It took a lot of controlling. It took a lot of patience and being cautious. And it was only really a couple of dice rolls that didn't go Nick's way that either freed the ball up or left the ball carrier open and let opportunities kind of appear. So a really, really good fun game against Nick. A patient game, but a good result for the Lizards. I'll hand over to my esteemed colleagues for any questions.
Was it your plan when you said there, Chris, that you felt you played a more of a controlled match, especially given how you played before against Nick? So scoring in turn 5, was that something you planned, or did you feel at that point you might have scored a bit too early and thought we were possibly going to force things?
Yeah, I wanted to score later. But Nick did. He always had a Pestigore in the backfield, kind of as a sweeper, and he kind of pulled the trigger on bringing that Pestigore over. Possibly, like I kind of sat back enough and didn't decide which way, left or right, I was going to go to get down the field. He pulled the trigger when he needed to there and put enough pressure on the ball and the ball carrier that I didn't feel I could afford to stall, because I know that the Pestigores are good positionals. You can score quite quickly with them. You can certainly score in 4 or 3 turns comfortably. So yeah, he forced me to score earlier, and then it was just about being quite patient and quite defensive, because I think I had lost a Saurus on turn 4, like in that defense. So I was already a Saurus missing next game, so I was 2 down by that point. So yeah, it was then a kind of a very patient defense.
And did any of those mutations come to their fore and cause you any issues?
So all of Nick's models have been amended. So the mutations are written on them, but the ones with tail, prehensile tail, have a tail. The one with tentacles have tentacles, which is really cool. It's a really good looking team. I think I was very cautious of the ones with tentacles to keep the skinks as far away from them as possible, because I have had games where my skinks have just been stuck and not moved anywhere. I was also very cautious of the prehensile tails to make sure that that didn't come into play as well. So yeah, it did kind of. I think because I was playing quite cautiously anyway, and I was keeping the skinks quite well protected, it wasn't too bad. But I was, yeah, very wary, particularly of the tails and the tentacles, to make sure that they didn't screw me over.
So 4 for 4 now for the Ducks, Chris.
Yes. Who'd have
Is
thought?
this the season?
Do you know
Is
what?
this it?
I was walking the dog and I was like, what is Scott going to ask me? And I thought, I know what Scott's going to say. Scott's going to say, is this the season? That's what Scott's going to say.
That's what you texted me to ask you.
I think it's too early to tell, because I think there are no coach, no other coach has all wins. I don't think there's there's no coach with that 100% record, so I don't think mine is going to last, because I just don't think that's realistic. The games I've got left to play are against some coaches who I know are very good, who I've never played before. I've got coaches that I have played before and I know are very good, and I haven't always beat them or not beaten them at all. So I'm not gonna count any duck eggs before they hatch. I think we're just gonna let it. We're just gonna see if we can continue this as long as possible. It's quite nice for there to be people around me who have played more games, because I'm looking at games. I'm looking at my game against the Halflings on Friday, and I'm saying to myself, they've got one game in the bank more than I do, and I'm 4 points ahead. If I lose, I've still got a game in the bank, and I'm still ahead in the table. So I'm kind of looking and being like, where can I afford to drop points? I'm not thinking every game is going to be a win. I'm thinking, if I'm going to drop points, where am I happy to drop them? And that's kind of where my head's at. A very fun game. Thank you very much, Nick. It was an absolute pleasure to play you as always. We will move on to the aforementioned Halflings. T-Belly Trudgers versus the Orphic Gladiators. A 1-1 draw here for two teams, both in contention at the top of the NBC. Absolutely. Luke is up there, having played quite a few games and only lost one game this season. The Halflings are having a very good run. So two coaches, absolutely, who will see themselves being able to finish in that top four. Easier maybe at the minute for the Orphic Gladiators, who are currently there, but the Halflings will absolutely be thinking that they can get into one of those spots. A close game here being played out by these two coaches. Scott, we'll come to you first. I think there's something that there are certain coaches that we've got now, I think, who have maybe built up somewhat of a reputation with kind of stunty teams that I almost don't consider. I look at this game and I almost don't consider it to be, Chaos Renegades versus a tier 3 team. I almost don't consider these Halflings as tier 3 when they're being controlled by Justin.
Yes, Justin has played this team phenomenally well. And, when you've got two trees with block, one with multiple block, the other with grab and brawler, it's really a formidable front line on the line of scrummage. When you add into that, the fun factor that is Cindy and everybody's little flying rat, which is Acorn, then it just gives him another level of dimension. And we know Justin is, a huge exponent of the one-turn touchdown with throwing Halflings. So that's always at the back of someone's mind. And I remember hearing Justin's cry for joys when a bomb took out the Rat Ogre as well. So I thought this was going to be a very, very difficult matchup for Luke against a very experienced, very challenging opponent. He had to take a couple of journeymen as well. He started with a niggling injury as well. So to get the Renegade Goblin scoring after turn 7 wasn't all over by a long way as well. Got a few more casualties, there's a few more casualties for the Gladiators as well. And then unsurprisingly, despite the injuries, the fouls, the sending offs, there's plenty of halfling linemen there to make a fist of it. And that catcher, again, he's in for that touchdown. So it was a very, very good match. I think in terms of the coach, for me, if I'm honest, at the start of the match, I thought Justin edged it in terms of being favourite for the game. So again, I think it just shows how Luke has come in terms of his progression as a Blood Bowl coach. Especially, this is only his second season, and of course, this is his first season with this particular team.
Yeah, I think I thought similar going into this game, that it was tricky because I'd played Luke already this season. I'd seen sort of how he'd played this season so far, the good results that he was getting. The only reason that I didn't think it would be a win for him here was that his opponent was Justin, who we know is very, very good, plays a lot of Blood Bowl, knows the game, and knows these halflings. So it kind of made it difficult to call to a degree. Tom, it's an interesting start for the halflings, immediately fouling and then getting sent off on turn one. And then before the touchdown comes, Cindy gets sent off, I'm assuming because of the double bomb on turn 6. But when you're playing one of these stunty teams, I don't know whether you are as concerned by that, because you've kind of got various tricks and things up your sleeve that maybe you rely on more than having the extra players.
Yeah, I was about to mention that because he's got 14 players. So, and in previous games he's played, we've mentioned it, that he's been quite a prolific fouler. In fact, I think he's second only to Scott Norman in the most dirtiest player, with 20 fouls at the moment. So he's clearly using that as one of his tools in his arsenal at the moment. And as you quite rightly say, you can always pick up the ball and throw a teammate over the top of a team and then score touchdowns. But it's been great to see that Luke has come on, especially as you say, with a brand new team that he hasn't, I don't believe, has really played a lot with before this season. So it sounded like it was a really quite intense game. I was sitting opposite them, and it's you always know it's an intense game when it starts to get a bit quiet, and there's just a lot of focus on the pitch, and there's not really wanting to interact with anyone else. So, but I think it was an enjoyable game. I just congratulations to both of them, really, especially to Luke for keeping it at a 1-1.
It was it's difficult to tell this season because we've got games that are happening. Sort of some people are playing quicker than others and things like that. It's difficult to kind of recognize when a game is a bit of a top table fixture, for places. And this was possibly one of the kind of first games we've had where you look at it, you look at the positions in the table, you look at the form, and you go, this is a bit of a top table fixture right here, which I thought was really, really good. And playing out as a draw keeps it tight at the top. I think there's going to be a couple of teams, 2 or 3 very, very strong teams who are going to miss out on that top 4 slot in this division because it's so tight at the top there. We will move on then to the World's Edge Berserkers versus the Ross Bay Riptides. Another 1-1 draw here. An interesting game that I know these are two coaches who I've never actually played against either of them in 11s. And if you told me I had to tomorrow, I would fear both of them. A lot of frenzy on the Corn side, a lot of block and mighty blow on the Dwarf side, and an interesting result playing out a 1-1 draw here. All the casualties coming for the Dwarfs in this particular game. And maybe when you look at the casualty count, Tom, you maybe think that gut reaction without knowing too much about this one, 4-0 on casualties, a 1-1 draw you might take as a Corn coach.
Absolutely. I spoke to James before this game, and he really wasn't looking forward to facing off against these Dwarfs. They're a formidable team, as kind of shown in previous seasons. But yeah, hats off to the fact they got a draw here. I heard as Jamie was leaving that his dice didn't really get warmed up until the very last turns of the first half. But as you can clearly see, they were on fire in the second half, causing numerous injuries after that. And then also bringing down the touchdown in the turn 15. So yeah, it was one of those ones that I really wanted to sit and watch, but unfortunately I had a match on, and there were so many great matches going on in Hopsters. You could hear the atmosphere in the place was really good. So yeah, great event.
Scott, a good result for well, you've got two coaches here who maybe you would expect both of them to be higher up the table at the moment. James currently not sort of maybe where we would expect him to be due to a few results. Jamie not up there quite yet, maybe because of not being played as many games. In another sort of, if this game was played at another time, it could have been a top table fixture. So maybe not a surprise that it ended to be quite a tight game.
No, not a surprise. It's a 1-1. Jamie redrafting the Berserkers, so hasn't necessarily got all of the toolkit that he had. And we all know when the dice aren't going your way for at least half a match. We saw it with Jack and the Muellers. It can be a real struggle. It can be a real push. And particularly when you're playing a coach of someone's experience like James, who I believe is the current reigning Stunty Cup champion for the last 2 seasons. And if you can win the Stunty Cup with Ogres, you know your way around a Blood Bowl pitch. So he's got this team. From the feedback on his first match, which was the 2-0 loss to the Washington Deadskins and Necro, James had his really bad dice night that night. So to come up against James, a good coach who has a little incentive of a small little rat called Hack Flem Skullspike, who's not too bad in terms of getting himself around the pitch as well, and to score that touchdown after turn 7, put him in a strong position. But I think he needed to get that first half score. He got the first half score, and then it was, can he survive the Dwarves? And surviving that Dwarves with those level of skills and against a very renowned coach in Jamie, unfortunately couldn't quite hold on as well, since the Dwarves getting that turn 15. Was it turn 15? Yeah, turn 15 touchdown. So yeah, I think this, even though it wasn't maybe a top tier or top table, Chris, I think they were, both coaches played very, very well with their respective teams.
Looking in the chat, James has said the game with Jamie was a close one. Managed to serve 2 Dwarves early in the first half and stunned a few, but nothing would stick. Second half, the Dwarves did a lovely drive looking to secure the draw. Great match, and Hopsters was a great host. Seconded that, James, absolutely. I think a game that we may look at later in the season, and both coaches may be happy to have taken a point and not a loss from once we get to that final group standings. Next game up, comfortably our game with the most touchdowns. An absolutely bizarre and frantic game happening next to me in Hopsters. This one, a 3-3 result. Amazons versus Humans. Lavender Lynxes versus the Clueless Crusaders here. Tom, I don't really know where to start. I think you're gonna have to tell us where to start here. I mean, like I heard, like I overheard some bits, and me and Nick turned and watched some things kind of happen. It sounded like enormous fun.
Oh, it was, yeah. It was one of those games where neither of us could break arm for love nor money. So we were just literally pushing people around the pitch. However, as I mentioned previously, this was one of those ones where, regardless of whether you kicked or received, the ball was just always landing on someone. So you were having that situation where, and people were picking it up. So literally, you kick the ball, it'd be a high kick, or Graham would have on the ball on his on his thrower, and they'd just basically pick it up on the first thing. So it was very quick. There was no waiting around for someone to pick the ball up in the backfield and run it all the way along. They'd already got the ball in the first time that they first turn that they got. I was super fortunate with the first turn 3 touchdown. It was one of those ones where everyone was piled in, and I spent, I think, probably 2 re-rolls to try and get my catcher to be pushed, as in chain pushed out into a position that they could do it. And luckily, this was one that had sprint. So I think Graham was quite confident that he didn't notice that it had sprint, even though he got the school band with it. That he thought, oh, there'll be one. He'll still be just one away from the touchdown, and I just needed that one turn, movement, which I managed to get. But not to be deterred, Graham came straight back. Within 2 turns, he'd even the score again. So I thought I'd just, do a bit of a YOLO and a 1-turn touchdown by lobbing the halfling, which was that again spawned that one second 1-turn touchdown this season with this halfling. So yeah, that was really, really good. The second half was equally insane, backwards and forwards, kind of tit for tat on scoring. It was one of those crazy games which both of us had a great time. Both of us enjoyed it. It was hard fought. Each point, one of us was up against the other. So you're like, oh, is it end of? Is that it? But they came back. So it was one of those great games that both teams played really, really well. Had some absolutely spawning moves on both sides, but we left thoroughly enjoying the game.
Looking at it, Scott, I'm looking at sort of when these touchdowns take place. Turn 3, turn 5, turn 6, turn 7. Absolute madness. Like looking at when the touchdowns actually kind of happen in this game. Humans and Amazons are both teams that can score quickly.
Yeah.
It's really nice to see a game where there's no stalling. I can score quickly and I'm going to do it.
I think it's fantastic. For me, I think this was the game of the night in Hopsters, because not just were there 6 touchdowns shared evenly between the teams, but as Tom alluded to there, you could just see the atmosphere on this table. It was the sort of game that as soon as everybody had finished or was close to finishing, you would, what's going on there? Why are they having so much fun and enjoying themselves? And that was very evident on both coaches' faces. It was some days you play with Blood Bowl and it's just, you almost can't stop scoring. It's, everything you seem to do, every role seems to be successful. And I think a kudos and shout out to both Graham and to Tom on this. So Tom, undefeated now in 2 games, 1 win, 1 draw. Is this the revival for the Crusaders? Is this the turning point of the season?
Don't know. Is it too little, too late?
Nothing's
maybe.
too little, too late, Tom.
It's managed to give me guard on my ogre, which has given me some kind of reassurance for the next games. One of which is against the World Edge Berserkers. So fingers crossed.
It looked and sounded like a really fun game, Tom. It was the sort that you're like, I'm sat here trying to focus on what I'm going to do with my lizards against Nurgle, but I really want to watch these humans and these Amazons play a game out. So, well done to you and Graham for playing
Just
out
a couple of things coming from chat there, really. Lord Spudboy, good evening, Scott. 3-3 and 0 casualties. Were you playing tag Blood Bowl? And then Justin on your 6, actually scoring touchdowns and not killing players. It's just not in the spirit of the game.
There we are, guys. You're playing it wrong. That's what.
So there you go.
Exactly.
A great game. Well played. Well done to you both. We will go on to our next game then. That's all for our Hopsters fixtures. So back in the shop, we have the Numpties. So this is the Numpties' last game. Incorrect from me earlier saying that the Hopsters one was the Numpties' last game. This is the last one. And is a 3-1 win for Nurgle against Dwarves and out casualtying the Dwarves as well. So a very good result for the Nurgle team here to finish their campaign. Scott, coming to you first, the numpties must the numpties will know they've won the league with dwarves, so they will know what to do against a dwarf team, and it sounds like they put that into practice in this game.
Yeah, this if you look at this on tour play, if you look at this is a great example in terms of how to manage your opponent, how to manage your own game plan as well. So to get the casualties on the dwarves, to keep pushing them back, which is an incredible thing to do, and I think that, as you mentioned, Chris, Elliot's knowledge of how to play and how to win successfully with a dwarf team really helped here. So that, and then the classic, almost the memery of the turn 16 touchdown right at the end there as well. I think that's really put Elliot in a good position for his, for his season. And a long way still to go for Jamie. Plenty of games to do. He's got a very solid team. He's playing some sort of clueless team as well coming up from what we hear. So I'm sure there are lots more opportunities for all those mighty blow +1 players and the guard and the block and the tackle. Yes. So I think there's don't write out the dwarfs by a long way. So I think this was definitely the, immovable, or the irresistible force and the immovable object meeting again, and on this occasion the good old pestilence of Papa Nurgle. I think really that, and the knowledge that Elliot has of dwarves, really got this 1-0 in the bag.
Tom, you'll have had this a little bit with your Necromantic Horror team. Having a look at the game, very early on, Elliot loses a Rotter lineman with a niggling injury, and then the Plague Ridden gets it a -1 to strength. But looking at turn 12, the Apestigor kills a Dwarf Blitzer and takes it as his own. How kind of key is that to his season, to not worry too much about losing players, as long as maybe you're taking a couple from the other team?
Yeah, vital. He's still got he's got 11 players at the end of this game, so he doesn't have to worry. Although, he's got 85k in the treasury anyway, so he's not really that fussed on that side of things. As Scott's mentioned here, Elliot has played dwarfs. He plays dwarfs very well, so he knows all the tricks in the book, so to speak. So he's clearly used that to his advantage by the looks of things in this game, and also piling on some injuries of his own as well as being injured himself. So it seems like a number of these games where there hasn't been a lot of bash going on, not until right to the last minute. And going back to what you said, Elliot's finished all his games, but Jamie, not being funny, he's really only just getting started. So he's going to be able to shift up quite a few positions, with this team by the looks of things.
Do we think Jamie's team has been redrafted? I think there's some players here that are on their maybe on their third season. One player that is I'm not sure actually, possibly. We can sort of have a check at another time, but he's got a few players that he's redrafting a few times. Is this season quite an important one to see how far he can get before he needs to start considering starting with a blank canvas, because the players start to get so expensive?
Yeah, I'd say so, because considering that some of them are like 140k now, that's quite impressive for Dwarf Blitzer at 140, the Runner is 145, Troll Slayer 115. So you've got a lot of kind of money on those. And as we've seen, both with the dwarfs and also the Chaos Dwarfs, they're not invincible. They can be taken out. So, one lucky dice roll and 140k Blitzer could be out. And, is that the straw that breaks the camel's back?
It'll be interesting to see how Jamie gets on with his next few games then. A slow start to the season so far, but 5 games left to play, so many more points to be had. Moving on then to another game. Again, two teams who are both still in the fight for a top 4 spot in the Nuffles Blood Bowl Conference. The Jaffa Cakes versus the Buffalo Biggins. A 1-1 result here. A game that almost resulted in the pitch clearance of the Snotlings, very, very nearly. 7 casualties to the Orcs, but 4 casualties to the Snotlings. An absolute slogfest here. And I guess, Tom, we start where we start every game with the Jaffa Cakes, by scrolling to the very bottom and listing all of the terrifying inducements. So in this particular instance, a giant mercenary, the Black Gobbo, Varag, Papa Skullbones, Riotous Rookies, Bribe, Extra Team Training, Team Mascot, and a Weather Mage. Just a handful there. To me, Varag and the Black Gobbo and a giant mercenary, that is one of the nastier combos, I feel.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the one thing I love looking at on Tour Play is the little timeline, and on a number of these timelines, they've been quite blank. Never the case when playing against the Jaffa Cakes. It's always cram packed with little Red Cross signs and helmets and boots and everything. So this again, it just looks insane. The amount of injuries on both sides, both with stat busts. That giant just running amok by the looks of things, especially in the second half. And again, it's also really interesting to see that I often see that people bring a star player. Or 2 in this case, and then you never see them on the actual kind of the rundown. They don't really do anything. They're merely there to be imposing characters, and people tend to either not make use of them or they just don't get going. This is not the case in this match. Gulshaw is absolutely being devastating here, as well as the Black Gobbo scoring the touchdown and fouling numerous times by the looks of things. Although there's a lot of fouling, not a lot of casualty breaks on that side of things. Even right at the last minute, even the giant gets in on the action with the foul and promptly gets sent off. Don't know whether I'd want to be the ref to be sending off a giant, to be honest.
It's weird with Snotlings, isn't it? Because we know that their armor, their low armor, their strength 1, their armor 6, they should be removable. But we've seen in many games already this season how tricky they can be to take off the field. Harrison, however, has seemingly had no trouble at all. He has absolutely ploughed his way through. 7 casualties that he got in this game, and that doesn't even include the knockouts. Scott, I don't know whether there's more of a trick to it, whether it is the dice at the right time, but Harrison doing what many coaches this season hadn't managed to do yet.
Harrison did a phenomenal job doing that, Chris. He showed. Tom mentioned a few moments ago that the Dwarfs and the Chaos Dwarfs can be beaten. Same with this team of the Snotlings as well. At the start of the Tour Play feed, when I think a lot of coaches are watching Tour Play just to see what star players will that coach roll, and should they feel absolute sympathy or should they feel some sort of derision to them as well. So as we mentioned there, seeing not just the Black Gobbo but Varag as well, and then you've got Papa Skullbones and all the other goodies in there. I thought it was going to be a very, very long afternoon for Harrison. Scott's put in chat as well. Horrid start to his game. Fumbled the bomb, pass Loner reroll, fumbled it again. Next turn, giant triple skulls, plus mascot reroll, plus Loner reroll, triple skulls again. The amount of bodies alone stopping Harrison getting the ball. Popped out and landed in the Black Gobbo's hands and a double rush. Dodge, beautiful. 2-turn sprint up the pitch, got me a touchdown. And then Harrison smashed every Snotling. So to see Harrison come back to really, make the most of the Orc brutality, the strength 10 armor as well. And if you're going to POW and you're going to KO, if you're going to take a Snotling off the pitch, don't KO it. make sure it's a casualty, make sure it's not coming back. So to get through to a level of, despite being 1-0, you're still in the game. You've even got a niggling injury on your troll, but you're still going. And good old AJ Ebenezer, however you want to call him, good old AJ, to get the resultant touchdown and some more injuries. And I think there might have been a slight, icing off that cake when AJ was taken out by the Giant at the end with a niggling injury. However, I'll put this to you two gentlemen, and I will put this to chat as well. And I don't want to be accused of stirring the pot, so I'm just going to grab both handles of this spoon and I'm going to stir it. So the question I have for everybody, the bounty that was put on the table by a very generous Scott Norman for all of those Jaffa cakes and for the donation to charity was on the condition to pitch clear the Snotlings. Did Harrison fulfill that brief? Did he pitch clear the Snotlings? He was only one away from the team, but did he pitch clear the Snotlings? And is that eligible for the bounty? What do you think, gentlemen?
I mean, if the phrasing of the bounty is to pitch clear the Snotlings, and there's only star players left on the field, it feels to me like Harrison has pitch cleared the Snotlings.
I would say so. I would agree on that. Yeah.
Mr. Norman, watching the Snotlings team was not clear.
Okay. All right.
I just hope there aren't any ambitious young lawyers out there who are looking for a no-win, no-fee case.
Well, I mean, a fantastic effort either way from Harrison, but still, this Snotling team with this very particular kind of setup that Scott has, still doing well, and both of these coaches, I think, are in a shout for a top 4 space when we look at the tables a bit later. So well done to them both for playing out a very entertaining game. We will go to our penultimate game then. Scott, we're coming back to you. And the run comes to an end, but against a very good coach with some very scary star players here. And why don't you give us a little breakdown of this 1-0 victory to the Corn team?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Just a quick shout out to James in chat. This was, with all respect to all the other coaches, this was the most fun game I've had this season. It was ridiculous. It could have gone either way. Yeah, and coming up, I've played Skitter myself, so I know what Skitter's like. He's a very threatening gutter runner with his stab and then with his, special ability to re-roll the injury. I hadn't played Skylar before, and I'm not really worried about, and if I don't play him ever again, he was very brutal. His prehensile tail was just an awful thing, which you think for a 3-up dodge for an elf wasn't great. Pouring rain didn't help. So what becomes just a simple 2-up and 2-up, 2-up for a Elven team suddenly becomes a 3-up, and then obviously a 2-up and a 3-up in terms of the pass catch. So it was a bit of a challenge one, and from the outset, James really, and I don't think it says it properly enough. James really just started beating me up, or beating the elves up. At one point, by half time, I had 3 elves on the pitch and a tree who'd been put down and just didn't get up in the end. So even with that, people will be very pleased to know that James had KO'd one war dancer and he'd surfed the other war dancer without sidestep, who had been saved by the love of the crowd. And yeah, even with 3 elves, I managed to stop the 1-0 turn as well there. Second half, just starting with 8s against a frenzy team is challenging, and especially when you can't dodge out or do anything. So it was really good. And this was, again, a reversal of the first match of the week. So in terms of the second half, the dice were very much against as well. And I was talking to Coach Acredes, Mr. Phipps in the shop, and I said, it's just the psychology of this game and the insanity of this game when you're almost paranoid to make a 3-up dodge roll. So it was ridiculous. So kudos to, and I failed 3-up leaps, I failed re-rolls, and kudos to James. He just kept on killing elves. which was brutal, as you can see. Both of my catches removed, you know, and at one point it was very challenging. And even when I had 2 turns to level the score, James did roll a solid defense, so did the best, and I could have scored to level it. And for what would be a normal elf turn, and you think for most elves this would be fine, 3 up dodge, 3 up, 2 up, and then you're in. And you know, even with the dodge inbuilt reroll, failed the first one, failed the second one. So it was a thoroughly well deserved win for James. It was a very humbling experience in terms of casualties and KOs for the elves, but yeah, it was a hell of a lot of fun, and I look forward to it. And a big shout out to James.
Tom, it's a bit of a tale of two teams here. It's James who had a slow start to the season, putting a few good results together. It's Scott with an incredible start to the season here. So it was an interesting kind of these two meeting each other at this time. It's difficult where to start. I think it sounds like James has done very well here. It sounds like maybe, and Scott, I don't know if you'd agree with me here, but I'm interested to see what Tom thinks. Maybe Scott's elves. Scott has done very well at keeping so many elves on the pitch for so long this season. Maybe law of averages alone was due to have a few of them removed and a bit of a game like this, which hadn't kind of come yet.
Absolutely, and well done for keeping those war dancers alive. You know, they are the absolute superstars here. You probably when they got KO'd and whatnot, you were probably hoping that you weren't going to roll a 4 when you brought them back on.
Well, there was an interesting point there, Tom, where James had blitzed and done a KO on the War Dancer. So at that point, when he was rolling, and I made the decision, and you know, do I use my APOC to keep him on the pitch at that stage in the first half, or do I bring him back on if I can with a 4 up? So I made the decision not to use the APOC to put him in the KOs. Fortunately, because then I had to use my APOC to re-roll a death roll on my catcher, the one who's really skilled up. So therefore, he does miss next game, but fortunately, he's still alive and with us. So yeah, it was doing that. And then the thing we need to talk about, Tom, as well, was the fact that James was rolling blue NDP dice, and he was absolutely getting, you know, armor breaks and injuries galore with those. So we might have to discuss.
Well, we might have to retract them now. Isn't that the rule that if they beat us with our own dice, they get retracted? Yeah,
I think we need to have a look at the small print. Yes.
What just a curiosity, what was the kind of fouling right at the very beginning all about?
Sorry, I was reading the creaties in chat.
Because you're playing elves that don't really need to go down the fouling route, and right in turn 2 and then turn 5, you're starting to foul straight away. What was the thoughts behind that?
That particular lineman, I did a random skill, and he got sneaky git. So I thought, well, why not? Simple as that. Plus, I had one of, I blitzed one of the linemen who actually stayed on the pitch and killed someone later, and actually killed that elf, ironically, or injured him at least. I had 3 +3 in terms of support. I rolled, got the armor break, couldn't get the injury break. Again, it's one of those where it was just getting stunned.
There's something I found very funny about the fox fouling, and then being killed by the chicken. Just found hilarious while I was walking around town on the day and seeing it on my phone.
Yeah, it was actually the fox it was the chicken who the fox had been punching on the ground as well and kept stunning him. And the chicken got up and said, "I'm not having this. You know, let's go roll reversal."
Beautiful stuff. Well, I mean, both these coaches, I think, sort of Scott, you're in a very good position near the top of the table. James, sort of a bit of a resurgent comeback. So, be interesting to see whether you guys meet again in a playoff further down the line. coming to our last game of the season, then it is the Vampires, the Suffolk Suckers versus the Wildermere Wasps. Wildermere Wasps' second game of the season against another opponent who has just been getting better and better with each season that goes along. Vampires, a tricky one to come into. He's taken a Vampire roster which has the Vargeist from the start, which I know, speaking to other Vampire coaches, can be a bit risky. But has been very patient on his skills. Most of them have block now. Kick on alignment will be very handy. So kind of a very simple skill set, but he's kind of taking his time here. Tom, coming to you as I always say, our resident vampire expert here. It's this matchup is an interesting one because you have the strength in those vampires that can combat those orcs. You've also got the agility. It looks as though, based on the result and based on the fact that not many of his own players seem to get too badly hurt, that the Bloodlust maybe has behaved themselves somewhat.
Yeah, you say I'm an expert. Clearly, not in this caliber, really. Equally, I think what I hear from like on Discord and stuff, there clearly was the very useful tactics of hypnogaze being used in this match. You know, going up against Black Orcs and a formidable team as they are, with mighty blows, as we mentioned, in blocks across the board, that hypnogaze really is a great tactic. Rather than face them strength for strength, because let's be honest, vampires have got some strength in them. You know, there's got a couple of strength 4 players in there. They've gone for the hypnogaze, and I'm assuming what they've done is they've broken through the ranks. And once you've got past those movement 4 orcs, what's left? Just some goblins. You know, so it really does show that certain tactics can be absolutely devastating against certain teams here. It also, as you quite rightly put it, hasn't been a lot of that many injuries. I was expecting to see a few more injuries, more on the vampire side with thralls, with these Black Orcs as well. So it was an interesting one on this side of things. Yeah, well done to the vampires on this one, on to the Suffolk Suckers, for getting a 3-0 win here.
Looking at the kind of where some of the injuries have come from, a badly hurt thrall on turn 8, so that possibly is a failed bloodlust before the touchdown there. Andy's in the chat saying that Moonface foul cashed the Vargeist on turn 1, but regeneration saved him. So it sounds like Andy just had a game where the things that he needed to go for him went well for him. Scott, looking at kind of how both these coaches are getting on this season, similar numbers of games played at this point, just the one win for both coaches at the moment, a couple of games left here. It sounds sort of like this game very much went Andy's way, but two coaches who I think could just find themselves stringing a few final results together and pushing a bit further up.
I agree. I think that both coaches will have an influence in terms of the final standings in the leagues. If we look at Andy and you look at how he's developed his vampires, his first game was a 2-0 loss against John, Mr. Reader, who is the vampire player extraordinaire for this season. I'm sure Tom Huns wouldn't might argue that one. But we know that was, a big learning curve as well. In the second game against Harry, Andy is ridiculously helpful and such a nice coach. He might have lost 3-2. He could have drawn the match. He scored 2 touchdowns. And then you can see, as you mentioned there with the Vargeist, things clicked very, very well against the Black Orcs as well. In terms of Simon, if you look at Simon's result, a good win against Carl to start with, and then against Luke and Harrison, and now Andy, who's found that form as well. As we said, with this team, it still feels it's just one maybe roll of the dice, one maybe play away from turning these very close matches into more draws and more wins as well. So I think but for both coaches, the season is far from over. I think there's a lot more Blood Bowl to be played, and I think that both of them will have an impact and an influence in terms of how the final standings look.
Yeah, I think you're right there. We're going to get to a point where some coaches may not be able, well, because we've got so many different playoffs that you can get into. It could be a case, you may be able to just creep into the next one or stop yourself dropping to the one below. There's so many more kind of choices and options now that I think there'll be things to play for right to the very end here. Um, Looking at the standings then and where they are after this set of games, the Numpties now sit at the top of the ABC, finished all of their games there on 17 points. The Atomic Cherry Bombs still fighting at the top there. And with the 2 games in hand over, the Numpties could still take that top spot. Chaos Storm and Wolverswampton Shamblers both round out the top 4. Looking at sort of other movers, James moves up into the top 8 there. Jack, having played all his games, will be looking below him for other teams' games to be played. And the bottom 4 stays pretty much as it was, with the Hillbeat Howlers, World's Edge Berserkers, Odin's Ravens, and Boulders Bowlers all sitting at the bottom there. In the NBC, Orphic Gladiators sit at the top, very close at the top of the NBC here. 14, 13, 12, 11 points is the top 4 here. Transfigurian Terrors, Bitey Ducks, and Bleeding Clowns in that top 4. But a little chasing pack of the Jaffa Cakes, the T-Belly Trudgers, and the Buffalo Biggins, all, only one result away from creeping their way up and fighting for a position in that top 4. Looking at the other end of the table, pretty much the same as it was. Crimson Coven, Dead Star Belgrave, Boulder's Army, and Inglorious Pustards make our bottom 4 in that section. And that is all of our games. That is all 12 games that we had this week. Again, a big thank you to everyone who came and played at Hopsters. We will see whether we can do more things like that in the future, because it's good to get everyone playing together. A final shout. We are at halfway. This is the halfway point. We have had 6 weeks worth of fixtures in the group stage. We have got 6 weeks left to go. If you have not played at least half of your games, you will have heard from me today. Please check your Facebook or Discord messages for a message from me if that is the case, just to check in. If anybody has games to play and they're worried about whether they are going to get all of those games played, just get in touch with us so that we can help you out and we can see what we can do sooner rather than later and look at the options so that everyone gets as many games in as possible. So please do get in touch. That's us for this week. Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much, Tom, for being here as always. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. That's the roundup all done. We will see you next week.